Hello, dear lurkers, and welcome back to the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. Today we are going to discuss the episode A Distant Star, not called Stardust. It's what I said in the previous attempt. A Distant Star. But before we are going to do that, we are going to answer our little introduction questions for you to get to know us better. And our introduction question today, fitting to our theme in the episode, is what is our favorite comfort food? Who wants to start?
Well, I guess I can start with maybe the most conventional choice, which is this mash of potato and carrots, and usually there's some sort of sausage in there as well, which I think each of us has a very different name for it, but it's just a very hearty, very warm, like comfort food that you can have basically any time of day in winter, and it keeps you warm. It's very good.
Yeah, well, the point is, or the question would be what you need to comfort. So depending on what's the problem I have, it's usually something different. The only thing that you could say is somewhat happening quite often that it is something sugary in mass. Not necessarily every time. I do have healthy comfort foods, but most of the time it's like a mental thing, and I'm afraid I dig into something like that.
Well, I mean, I could also start like that. Sweet stuff definitely belongs on my list because I love to bake cupcakes. But I have to say, my first thought for a comfort food was something really savory with a lot of meat that I eat when I'm stressed. And mostly when I'm stressed, I'm running from appointment to appointment in a train station. So between meals, I end up with something like a steak and a burger, or whatever, a steak in a bread bun or a burger or something like that. So it would definitely be just I want to have a little snack and then I have a Schnitzelbrötchen or something like that.
That's the most German possible answer you could give. That is very nice.
Sorry. Yes. So our comfort food would definitely also be something that Dr. Franklin would put not onto our food plan, I would say. But before we get into that, I think I should summarize the episode. In this episode, we have, once again, a lot of things going on that are not really as tied together yet. We have a ship, an explorer ship entering or reaching the station, the Cortez, who also has as a captain an important figure from Sheridan's past. We are introduced with weird things happening at the rim as well as in hyperspace, because in the end the Cortez has to be saved from hyperspace, which is up to this point something that has never been successful before. So we have this riddle of there's something going on there that we cannot quite explain yet. Another thing is that, we get a food plan from Dr. Franklin. Each character has another kind of food that they should or should not eat, and they would like to switch. Little character slapsticks. What's the other plot? Sorry.
It's not a very strong plot, but we have multiple scenes with Delenn dealing with the transformation.
Yes, we have a lot of, I would just say we have, of course, we learn more about him then, but we have a lot of station daily life things going on that we can get into detail about.
Very much. It's like Sheridan's big struggle this time around, isn't it? Yeah. In this case, I think this might be a good episode to talk about Delenn's transformation in general, because we didn't really have a big chance to do that with you, Meike, yet, so we can definitely do this. But of course, as usual, first impressions, right?
First impression. What were you thinking?
Yeah, well, I was surprised that, I mean, I'm not sure how to phrase it, but on the one hand, it feels like it's only the fourth episode, but also it's already the fourth episode we are having here, and the mysterious enemy appears finally to the eyes of the humans, or to the people to Babylon 5. I was a bit surprised on that. I was, according to the first season, expecting to have to wait a bit longer until this happens. Therefore, it felt a bit quick. Maybe I'm just too used to this slower pacing of season 1, but it felt a bit quick here. But I still like the way it was handled, because it was not like they were going at each other, but it felt more like something happening, just some circumstances we have here, and not like, oh yeah, we need to stop the humans from going from A to B. And yeah, well, I like the little tidbits that were happening on the station around getting to know a bit more about Sheridan, a bit, the whole stuff with the diet plan that Franklin tries to push through, and of course the little bits that we get with Delens. So I have to say they were not really surprising to me, the way things happened.
And unfortunately, sort of resistance to her that was to be expected. Yeah, how about you, Layla?
I have to say that this episode is a little bit special to me because when I first watched Babylon 5 and I was aware that I was watching Babylon 5, this was the first episode that I recognized because I'd watched it before once. I caught it on TV with a German dub. It was awful. But I didn't know what I was watching. I thought it was another kind of Star Trek, and I didn't really stick to it. I didn't even follow, but just the face of the captain of the Cortez. What is his name?
Maynard.
Maynard. I remember him, and I remember him talking about what's happening out on the rim. And that were the first images of Babylon 5 I've ever consciously seen, and I recognized them immediately when in the real watch through I watched that episode. So I was relieved to see that it was not Star Trek. But no, this episode is, it is trying to introduce, to make this riddle a bit more interesting. But so far, when you watch it for the first time, you have no idea what this is all going to be about. So it's still a bit of, I'm being caught in this tension a little bit, but I don't know really where it's going yet. But knowing what's going on, I find that very, very compelling and interestingly written, but I think we have to talk about that a bit later.
We certainly can. And I mean, for my part, it won't be a surprise that I'm very excited because we get to see a big spaceship and we get like a big spaceship action sequence in there, and we get to see hyperspace. And I'm never quite sure, have we seen hyperspace before? Have we been in there up to this point in the show? I'm not sure.
It's a good question. Meike, have you seen hyperspace before?
I'm not sure either.
Okay, good. So it's...
But the problem is that, we have this opening sequence or closing sequence here now. I'm not sure if we were in hyperspace itself so far. The problem I have here is how it's portrayed, because it kind of it's comparable for me to the slipstream in Andromeda. I mean, you don't have this energy strings flowing around, but the whole thing feels like not the same, that would be mean, but close enough to make a comparison there.
It's interesting that you really draw a comparison, because usually I would make a remark on how unique the hyperspace in Babylon 5 is, but regardless whether or not it's the first time, it's for me a very memorable time that we get introduced with hyperspace, and also a little bit how people in this universe talk about it as this realm where it's mysterious. You hear like rumors about things going on, their ships get lost there and such. That makes the whole thing very reminiscent of like Age of Sail exploration. You go out and sometimes ships don't come back, and yeah, that's just very exciting for me. But I also always appreciate the little character tidbits in here, because I think, Layla, you already said that we have a lot of day-to-day operations on the station here, and that's just very nice to see, especially after so many like big events have happened. Now things are slowing down a little bit, and it's still busy, but it's less galaxy-spanning crisis every time.
Maybe to get back to hyperspace, the only things I can put there for comparison is the slipstream in Andromeda, but also the stargates, because the whole concept is more or less the same.
Yes.
Like we open a hole in space and go through it, and on the other side we end up somewhere else. And I'm not sure but how to phrase it, but it feels like it's constructed in a rather similar way. You have the only thing you don't have here in B5 is that you don't have this like energy flows shown through enormous light explosions like we have with the stargates. You have like a ring appearing now and then to make this like some sort of tunnel or like that. And with Andromeda you have this energy strings going or circulating the spaceship. So maybe a bit less fancy, which makes it also a bit more interesting because it's quite simple in its way, and that I get that makes it charming compared to other options out there.
Yes, I mean, as far as we have seen, the ships and the people entering hyperspace stay in their form and matter. They are not transformed necessarily into energy. I think that has never really been implied, which is also why hyperspace is this mysterious space that you have to navigate like ships on the sea did, while in Stargate you just have to have the right address and hope that no one shuts the gate down. Something completely different there, yeah.
It's an interesting mix of the two from Stargate. I mean, you mentioned this, Meike. Immediately my mind goes to Stargate universe, where you have the big Destiny vessel that goes out into space and builds new Stargates, right? Which is exactly what the Cortez does in this show. So this idea that space travel is dependent on these big gates and expanding the space that civilization is in is like building up this massive infrastructure. This is something that I really enjoy. And also what I find quite interesting about hyperspace in Babylon 5 itself, whether we're talking about Stargate or something like Star Trek or Star Wars, and I'm not sure about Andromeda, but I think also to a similar extent there is the sense that you enter whatever FTL travel you have, and then you are quite passive. You are at warp, or you are in the Stargate, or you are flying through hyperspace in Star Wars, and it's just kind of this tunnel that you go through and you don't do all that much. Or is this different in Andromeda?
In Andromeda you have usually a pilot. You have them like going left.
Yeah.
And they have to navigate through there, and it can happen that you take the wrong route and end up somewhere else.
And this makes it much more similar that we have, at least there are a handful of these examples where FTL travel is a much more involved process, and that I really like in Babylon 5 you build like tracking stations and buoys and navigation networks and stuff inside of hyperspace to kind of put everything through. And similar then to Andromeda, it's something that you actually have to worry about, and it's not quite as comfortable as in many of the other universes, and it's also not as fast at all.
I wouldn't like to be in hyperspace.
I don't think anybody does. I mean, Meike, you are the perfect person to talk to about this now. We watched Event Horizon, right? Like, I feel like the very first mission that in Babylon 5 somebody took into hyperspace must have felt very much similar. We went into a different dimension that is red and screaming at us the entire time. That's probably just hell. We probably just traveled through hell and back to get somewhere. So yeah, it definitely has this like uneasy air about it, which is so funny that Captain Maynard is so excited to travel through it all the time when it's so scary.
Yeah. But it's interesting to see here that there's no, or at least no obvious physical reaction of the people.
Yeah.
I have to think of let me think about it. Heroes of Tomorrow, Legends. DC's Legends of Tomorrow, where there's also a time travel spaceship, and every time they jump. Especially the first few times you do this, there are really almost funny reactions from the people, from just quite normal throwing up to I am blind, or I speak my language system is completely wrecked and I speak in the wrong terms, with the wrong words, or in the wrong syntactic constellation. It's quite funny to see the first few times.
An interesting similar example of this that I have is like somewhere in the bookshelf back there, the Odyssey 1 series, which is a fun little like military sci-fi space opera book series. Humanity has this quirk that all human technology is extremely experimental and not optimized at all. So the way that humanity travels through the space is that they make very many small like FTL jumps, and they just do them in very quick succession so that it becomes extremely nauseating, which is why nobody else does it that way. But it is oddly effective in this way. It just means that also the crew after every journey is just knocked out for a little moment, and it goes similarly from vomiting to complete loss of memory, that it's just an absolute ordeal, but it's the only way they know how.
Memory is a really tough one.
It's unfortunate when it comes to your crew.
You start the journey with, I have to, explore this and that, or have to do some scientific research that is imminent for, some health problems. And then you end up on the other side and like, where am I?
You better hope you weren't supposed to make like a course correction, otherwise it's gonna be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, and Stargate, it's also like that. I guess that some people are just kind of reacting to traveling through the Stargate. Some end up on the other side and are sick and are disoriented, and others don't notice it. And I mean, I guess the ways you travel nowadays are also tough for some people. I mean, I'm super good with taking ships and things like that. I can never get seasick. I don't know. It's maybe because I have pirate blood. I don't know. But some people there are dying, and I totally get it. But I'm so scared of flying. I really think that if I don't know, fly ever again, I will just, my whole brain will shut down. And I guess it's like that. Some people are different there.
And that's an interesting...
The question is, of course, how you travel in the sense of which kind of vehicle you take. I mean, ship usually is constructed the same way, but then there's, I'm not sure if it's the same term in English, catamaran. This where you have this two-stream-like thing. Because usually I'm on ships perfectly fine, but we took the one time, I think it was some vacation thing, and this was the faster way back home, and we took this one, and honestly that was the worst ship travel we had so far. I was there with my parents and a colleague of mine with his parents, and the older ones, like our parents, were all holding there with the bags and were trying desperately to keep their last meals, and it was horrible. It was the most horrible trip I have ever made. So yeah,
I would have never guessed that just the way that you build your ships can make such a big difference. It's fascinating.
I mean,
it certainly made. I mean, it was far quicker than the way before, but it was such a horrible trip, honestly. And I mean, you had this I don't know what they're called, this vomiting bags everywhere. I mean, they were prepared for something like this to happen. So yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it just makes it an interesting question. Like, what is the equivalent of that in something like the Babylon 5 universe? Like, how many people even can engage in interstellar travel? And are there just some people that just plain can't do it? Or you have to put them under, like, complete narcosis for the entire trip, because otherwise they will just freak out of their mind.
But I mean, you have that on airplanes as well. You have people who freak out. You have people who throw up all over the place constantly. So I think we just deal with it, and you just have to make the decision to go or not.
It's just, one of the many hurdles.
Some might just train it, like astronauts doing their rounds. I mean, I remember I was on a amusement park and in a gravitation wheel, and I was going out there. Wow, that was cool! I want another round, and my friend was, yeah, you can do it alone.
And I mean,
Lying on his bench here.
And I mean, also for other ways of travel, you sometimes have to train things. I just remember how I went to Budapest by train. So I drove in the train for 14 hours. And I just had to come to terms with me using train toilets because, in 14 hours, you just cannot keep it in. And I have claustrophobia. So on shorter trips, I was practicing, I will get out of here. I will get out of here. These metal doors are not going to eat me. So, these things can be trained.
Just like an astronaut.
I mean, it was a similar challenge for me, okay?
Small closed spaces, there is some overlap there for sure.
I mean, the same is with airplanes. I think the most funny experience I ever had was flying with my grandma. She was sitting on the side of the window. I was looking out. Oh, this is so great. Oh, this is so great. You have to watch out there. And I was like, no, I don't want to.
Then I also don't want to. I mean, I'm going to fly somewhere soon, most probably, but I'm not looking anywhere. I'm just entering, reading a book, and leaving.
And I might mention my grandma was at that time almost already over 80.
I mean, at that point, maybe it's just you are hardened enough by the rest of your life experience. This is only excitement left.
Maybe we can take our little endeavor in the means of travel to ask our lurkers, what was your most horrible, amazing trip that you have made so far? I mean, the travel stories out there that you can read are already astonishing. So maybe you have one to tell us too.
And just like that, it's all relevant to the episode again. Perfect transition right there. So let's start with one of the big topics that this episode has. This might be a good opportunity for us to talk about Delenn and her big debut as being out of the cocoon in season 2, because we were mourned that last episode she wasn't really a part of it, and now we finally got the chance to talk with Meike about all of this. And let's start maybe by rewinding back to season 1 and The Gathering and the original plans for the Delenn character. Meike, you just got confronted with a picture of the original Delenn from The Gathering. You remember what she looked like in season 1, you know what she looks like now. And we might have already covered this very briefly in The Gathering, but the original plan for Delenn was that she was supposed to be a man throughout The Gathering and the entirety of season 1. This is where this makeup comes on, where, the chin and jawbones and stuff are massively pronounced, because this is modeling Mira Forlan's, the actress' face into a more masculine style. The problem was, apart from this being a horrendous makeup process that she would have gone through every single episode in season 1, they couldn't make the voice work. They tried altering it digitally and stuff, and that just never worked convincingly that they were happy with it. So they scrapped those plans. Which is a shame, because otherwise the original plan would have been that she transitions between season 1 and season 2, not only from Minbari to half-human, but also from a Minbari man or androgynous, non-gendered alien to a human woman. You already mentioned that the reveal after her cocoon is a little bit of a letdown. Originally, it would have been a much bigger deal. And I think this is relevant because if we talk about, especially in this episode, people's reaction to her transition, we can talk about this on 2 levels. There's definitely the level of politics. What does she try to do as an ambassador of the Minbari, and what does this do to her position of authority? But there's also still, and I think these are still very strong, the undertones of a narrative of here is a person who has just transitioned, as in a trans person, and is dealing with that. And I think we have to make a distinction between these two, because at least on my end, I might have very different opinions on these reactions, whether or not we're talking about this on a political or a personal level. But we can get to that later. Just this as a big information dump for you of what the original plans were here, which might explain also a little bit where this storyline goes.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I like the original idea far more because it's a more interesting take, and it would have, displayed the Minbari more interesting. If they, if they were generally like having this concept of having no gender or both genders at the same time, no matter how you want to put it.
Continue. I'm sorry.
What did you want to say?
No, I'm sorry. I just the way you put it, I had to think of one very particular Star Trek TNG episode, and that just made my brain melt. But we don't have to get into that at all. Let's stay serious because this is a good one to talk about. I'm sorry.
Okay, I go then.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of them having like no gender or two genders, or however you want to put this. Though no, gender would be the wrong term here. It's the sex.
Would be technically talking about biological sexes, yes.
For the non-German listeners, we don't have this differentiation of term in the German language. Therefore, it's sometimes a bit messy to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who has ever tried learning German knows our relationship to this stuff is language-wise very weird.
Yeah, we decided by throwing dice.
Yes.
Yeah, but the point is, it's interesting because it would be far more complex situation and would cause different problems. I mean, if you didn't have to think about something like this is male, this is female, which aligns more to what I think about this whole concept of gender, because I think, there's this biological part that you can't talk away, and the rest, do whatever you want, feel however you like. It's your business and no one else can say otherwise. But it would have been interesting to talk about this in this concept of science fiction, and the display would have been rather interesting.
I think so too, and it would have added like a whole more concrete dimension when she talks about I went into the cocoon to like facilitate cross-cultural understanding in a better way. If these categories exist in humanity and not so much in Minbari culture, that would immediately be one of these like new insights that she gains. And who knows what they would have done then with the question of like, what does this mean for our souls and stuff like this. So there's just a lot of potential in there. And I will say, I don't think all of that got lost in here. I think knowing this background, we can find many of these elements in here. It's just nowhere near as explicit. And of course, the big reason usually given for this is the makeup and the voice box. But I think it's also fair to say, you mentioned Star Trek and such, in a 90s TV show, dealing with these topics so openly is also something that might have been more difficult to get past producers and stuff at this point. So, we just kind of have to read between the lines more so than we do probably modern shows.
It's really the case because we're talking here about an alien. I'm going back to literature there because in the context of the fantastic, you have this because it is something unnatural, it got past the censors.
Yeah.
This goes for if you take a dive into this topic of the fantastic and read a few books, there is some really crazy shit going on there. And it was allowed. I mean, it started like in, let me tell you something wrong, 1800 something. They were rather rigid on, no, we can't get this out for the people. They will get sensitive. I mean, we have still class in some countries. I'm trying to get myself not to get outraged right now because this is a topic rather sensitive to me. But this was a way for a lot of authors to write over about things that were usually censored because it was considered inappropriate. And the context of this being an alien, an unnatural creature, I think would have still worked in the 90s to get this past producers and whoever was in charge.
I wouldn't say it couldn't have gotten past it. I do think it would still be noteworthy, at least if we look at examples like the TNG episodes and stuff. These are ones that are, to this day, very, very proud with themselves for having done that. And I mean, this is where I personally think it would have been a great blessing if a show like Babylon 5 would have done something more overtly, because then we wouldn't have such a, special case franchise on our hands.
I actually would like to point out that I think this way, for me personally, the metaphor works better.
Okay.
Because this way I see a trans story. This is not a transition in terms of sexuality, but it is still a transition because of an identification with something. It's like she still made this decision, and she made very invasive and dangerous decisions to change her body for something that felt right for her, something she identified with, something that meant the world to her, something on that level, which is how I always understood. I mean, I cannot speak for trans people, but how I often understood the decision when friends told me about it who went through a transition, that it's this kind of psychological, emotional truth to help the body to fit better into that, to find yourself, then be at peace with that. That's one level, at least, that I've always understood about their stories. And I think while living in our world, we are often confronted with these kind of transitions with in a matter of sex. And here it's just a transition on that has a similar drive, that works in a similar way, that has similar, quite unknown at that point, consequences for your body, for your safety, but is therefore, I think, a good metaphor for any kind of trans journey.
And I mean, this, what you describe, is also precisely what Dylan herself gives voice to, right? When she argues with other Minbari about this in this very episode and tells them, I feel more part of you than I've ever done. It's very much this, what she has done is affirming her own identity in her body, which is, ultimately what it's supposed to be about.
Maybe, since what you've said right now, Layla, I think it fits better for the 90s, because I could imagine in the 90s it would have been that even though we have this unnatural alien being here, the focus would still have been too much on the change of gender, of sex here, and therefore maybe missed the whole reason this had, what you just explained.
Yes, that as well. And also now I can take the story and the whole transsexual issue is not directly in it, so I can use it better as a metaphor when I want to get into that topic.
Especially because this over-sexualization is still a big part of it, right? Starting to police what people do in their bedrooms and completely ignoring the fact that, we're talking about something that has to do with somebody's whole identity and not just that very specific niche part of it. So maybe inadvertently they dodged a bullet here and were sort of forced into a portrayal that, at least in our perspective, works even better here. But sure, we can. That's also debatable, of course.
Can we make just a short pause, because I just realized David left his trouser.
We will leave that in.
Now I will just have to cut over clean backgrounds for all previous stuff.
No, it's fine. I just saw this and it totally irritated me.
Okay, so I will just make a little text that now David walked in without his trousers, and there's a very involved lap dance associated with that. So he got his trousers, and now we can go back to the discussion. Good, I like it.
Yeah, maybe this gets Frankie away.
I don't know, maybe he's into it. Who knows? There's a lot of repressed emotions there.
Oh.
I'm still happy to talk about the transformation, but I would like to also talk about the political side of it. Before I go on a tangent there, do we have anything more on the personal side for Dylan?
Or maybe not yet. I mean, what I would like to talk about, I think you would count more to the political side of it.
I mean, we will definitely also talk about her whole star stuff speech later on, but that's not
something else.
Exactly. Okay, because it's very important to me to make this distinction, to talk about this for one on the personal side of, maybe being even conceived as a trans story, because then there's also the political side on it, where I have to say, as much as the other Membari are kind of, painted as the assholes of this episode of not being accepting to her, I think they kind of have a point, because if we divorce this from the personal story that Dylan is going through, she's an ambassador who had the brilliant idea of, taking a part of human anatomy and putting that on herself and saying, hey guys, now diplomacy is going to be easier. And if I take that political level of the story and I imagine, the French ambassador goes to an African, post-colonial country in blackface and says, hey guys, is this helping? I can see why people would question his authority. Or rather, if I imagine, somebody genetically altering themselves to another people without anybody's consent, I wouldn't send a question to the government if this is okay. I would just straight up say, okay, this person is not fit for their office, let alone when I hear, oh, this is because of a prophecy they believe in. Oh, great. Please do not have this person in any kind of authority. So I think on a political level, there's a lot to be said about what Dylan is doing here.
Yes, but I was just thinking if this example of the black painting or of the genetically altering is really the only thing this metaphor tries to tell us, or if you think of how can we change, if we think in nationalities, how can we change the identity of a person to something that is this in-between state? And I mean, let's take two nations that have never been quite friendly with each other or have had a difficult history with each other. Let's take something like Poland and Germany, and you have a couple where one is from Poland and one is from Germany, and immediately their identities become like an in-between thing. And sometimes when the situation gets heated up, they might be asked, are you still a part of us, or have you so many influences that you are not a part of us anymore? And I don't know, I think you could also make a point of, yes, but if we have people that are in between, that are not functioning in these made up constructs and lines anymore, it is important for diplomacy because it puts things into question.
I think that is completely valid. I would question whether Dylan, as a big representative of clearly them, I don't want to say aggressor, but the ones that almost bombed us into the Stone Age, is really the one that should be in position here. If we talk about Germany and Poland, if the German ambassador decides, you know what, it's time to be friendly now, I feel like he should wait for the representative of a country that was invaded to also come to this term. Like you say, there should be a mutual agreement to do this, to get to this in-between stage. If it's just one side, and especially the side that committed some atrocities, then it's much harder to get into this in-between space and not say it. That being said, you're also completely right that I'm obviously taking a very narrow interpretation of this situation to kind of drive the point home. Naturally, the actual situation is a little bit more nuanced and not a one-to-one analogy to anything going on here. That's a given.
The problem I have here is that so far we just know of the physical change that happened with her. We do not know in what kind of sense this would influence her, her soul, her spirit, whatever you want to call it, the mind. It's not like, if we go back to the comparison with nations, it's not like I could go over to, I don't know, Poland, France, the Netherlands and say, now I'm in part of your nation or your culture, I have to learn it. It's not like just being there makes me, in the sense of a nation, of a culture, part of it. I have to learn it. I have to understand it. I have to see, okay, they are doing this different than what I have done so far, and see why are they doing this that way. And that's the problem I have with this, human Minbari transition, because there is so far nothing to see but a physical change, and we do not know in what way the Minbari are different. So we do not have any way of really seeing this or having shown it to us.
Yeah, we will have to see whether she has to deal with physical aspects that become this challenge, that make her more empathetic, that change these things for her. So far, we have not seen anything like that.
But I mean, there's also a positive read on this, where you could say, like you mentioned, Meike, you have to all actually engage with the culture. You can't just, look like them. You have to learn it. But then this is something that Delenn already did quite successfully before going into the cocoon. When she had her discussions with Sinclair and such, it was very obvious that she was engaging with human culture a lot more than any other Minbari that we've seen. Or we look at Linnea learning about motorcycles. So we can also see that this drastic physical change that she's undergoing is not a prerequisite to be able to go in there and learn about the cultural impact that the Earth Minbari War, for example, had. So it's
but the question that enables this is then why do the transition? If you do not have to be a human to learn this, then why become now a human? I mean, there has to be a reason for this physical thing, and so far we haven't seen anything, because we do not know enough about the Minbari physics.
Yep.
And of course her changes.
And I mean, ultimately, this is also one of the questions that the other Minbari could ask her very justifiably. Okay, you changed yourself to a human for that proper thing to be done, but are we all supposed to do this now? Like, surely this is not the solution to have a good coexistence, and especially, what are all the other alien ambassadors going to think about this? Like, oh, the humans are important enough that we need a hybrid to interact with them. I guess there doesn't need to be a Minbari-Drazi hybrid, because the Drazi don't matter that much. Which, honestly, it would be so fun to see a half Drazi, half Minbari. Now I want to see that show. Anyway.
But I mean, you can answer that question, because have the Drazi and the Minbari ever had a war where one almost wiped the other out?
Have you seen the Minbari? Have you seen the Drazi? I'm sure they have the potential.
Yes, okay, but that's something else.
The Minbari have purple spaceships. You know that this is a problem at some point.
Still something different.
Question though would be, maybe it's just in my interest, but how did they make this transition, this hybrid form, and is it just able to achieve this in a scientific way, in a forced way, or can it be achieved naturally? Having, I don't know, a human dad and a Minbari mom or something like that.
I mean, I have to say, out of all the ambassadors, I would have expected Jakar to be the first one to produce like hybrids that way, not Delenn.
Yeah, it's surprising that so far we never have seen such an offspring, because in Star Trek they run around everywhere.
I mean, the implication seems to be that in Babylon 5, this is not something, like, this is why Delenn needed the cocoon and stuff. This is obviously a more involved process than just let's have children together, because that doesn't seem to work, which, I can believe easily enough that they don't produce a viable offspring.
Yeah, but I mean, that this is from the 90s, but if you look at what we know now on how different species can be and still produce offspring, that is kind of a bold statement about all of these species, right?
I mean, it depends very much on like how Star Trek goes out of its way to explain that everybody has the same genetic origin. This is not, so it's, the biology of this is complicated.
Maybe we could look at the one conversation Delenn has with this other Minbari, where he asks her if she still is a part of them, of us. And Delenn says, I'm more a part of us than ever before. My interpretation would be that Delenn and he have a very different definition of us. So when they talk about us, I would say that they talk about a different level of who is included in us.
Yeah, the problem here is that the other Minbari doesn't know what Delenn knows, which is that the Minbari souls are reborn as humans or partly as humans, which makes this whole conversation, a bit redundant, since they are not on the same level of knowledge or explaining what they mean to each other.
Delenn does a very Delenn thing once again, where she says, I am myself, and you will accept that because I say so. She is very much like playing her trump card of, I am the authority here, which she has done, and we cheered her on with Neroon before, and she has done when, burning a body and stuff. And here we kind of see how this is not a very convincing strategy. Like, I don't blame the Minbari on board the station to now want to go elsewhere and get some confirmation on this, because just being told you are going to accept this because I say so is not a very convincing argument, even...
Yeah, no, but it's a Minbari way. But what I like to say about the us, actually, and that's really, once again, a completely different thing, is that I think that from her point of view, from being the ambassador on this station where there are so many humans, from also her having this kind of fascination with humans ever since they almost wiped them out, I think that the us that she talks about really is this state of things that, from her point of view, is interacting with the prophecy and whatever that is needed. So she is this us that she thinks is needed to withstand whatever storm, whatever darkness there is in the future. So of course she says, I am still us, but I think she says, I am the kind of us we need to make it through whatever is next.
Yeah, and that is, of course, difficult to take without any context, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still an important statement here, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I broke the chain of cynicism here, yes.
Well, there's nobody cynical here.
Anyway, where were we?
So what's left of this episode are the less sort of grand political and spiritual plots, and the more human concerns of good food and being overwhelmed with work. So which one of these would we like to touch on first?
Food. I think it's the quicker one.
All right. I mean, yeah, obviously, because both of you are just eating here, which is just no self-control and terrible. So I think Franklin is taking revenge on everybody being grumpy on his bed last episode, because he is deciding, spurned on by Garibaldi's terrible diet apparently, that it's time to do some food plans. Turns out the chief medical officer of this station has nothing better to do, and he's a perfectionist, so, he's gonna micromanage and optimize our crew. Which leads to beautiful shenanigans, including Ivanova becoming the expanding Russian frontier, which is one of my favorite lines of hers.
Can you repeat it?
Of course, yes, but I didn't like the answer Franklin has given.
I don't like many answers that Franklin is giving in this episode. I think we can all agree that what he's doing here is a terrible idea and not good practice.
I mean, my first thought in this whole food plan thing actually was that, why am I a doctor on a still kind of military basis, military operation, and I'm surprised when people eat bad things at the wrong time? It's like, I've just been almost killed 3 times in defending the station, so I have a burger. I mean, it's like, granted. When would she do that if not then? But yeah, can you repeat Ivanova's line?
All my life I've fought against imperialism, but now I've become the expanding Russian frontier.
Yeah, and what does he say as a response again?
Franklin's response is something along the lines of, yeah, but you have pretty borders.
What?
Exactly.
Yes, you have always borders.
He is a very creepy man, in case nobody noticed yet. He has not good conduct when it comes to his patients.
I have so often overheard this statement. I have never wanted to
We're
do
just like
this.
societally trained to not even register any of these comments. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I was like, lovely, Franklin. You just managed to fall even deeper in the pit of I hate you. I mean,
Yeah.
you can say this maybe to your girlfriend if she's all right with it. If you have this kind of friendship relationship, maybe, depending on the person. But they don't have a relationship like that at all. And
No,
so, shut up.
it's a very unfortunate interaction, and a very unfortunate way for him to start off there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure if he's really saying this to her or more saying to himself, but anyway, it's inappropriate.
And I mean, it also kind of goes to show that, and I mean, this is what I mean. Obviously, you know, there are good places for having food plans. There are medical reasons to ascribe certain diets and stuff, for sure. But it becomes very obvious here that Franklin just needs a hobby. He needs a project to work on, and this is kind of how he treats the entire thing, extremely nonchalantly, not in a professional manner, and that is what kind of makes it
Yes.
unpleasant.
Also, at that age, I mean, I think all of our characters are under 50. What does have to be wrong with you to actually need a food plan if you are fit enough to be in the military? I mean, I am not really sporty and I've never been asked to change my diet, so it's a bit over. For all of the characters, I think it's a bit over the top.
I mean, usually it's this thing to change your diet if you have some systematic problems. Like if you have diabetes, it's the most important thing to change. Usually, it's usually that the people do not eat the way they should to live longer, hopefully. Even though there are medics, the medics won't, make the problem go away. So you usually have a diet with people like this, or if you're like a sports person where everything is, where you have to eat a lot, or if you're like a muscle builder or something like that, then yes, then it's important. But at this point, I mean, you have to eat a lot of crap in this position and everything. And on the other hand, I'm not sure if it is that easy to get the same, let's say, way of fast food we have here now on the space station, where it is obviously even bloody hard to get, what was it called, banya cauda? So
If all the ingredients have to be imported, right, you can kind of see where this is going. But I mean, it's kind of made obvious in this episode that there is no medical reasoning for any of this. This is why Franklin gets this idea just spontaneously and then decides to make it his project. It's not like he has any examination with them before and decides, oh, this might be a good idea. So the guy needs a project. The guy needs a hobby. The guy needs friends outside of work. It's just not a good time with him. But I mean, we do get a few fun scenes out of it.
Yes, I like Sheridan's reaction. That's rabbit food.
It's rabbit food also. We are a doctor-patient team, so you are the team member that does the diet part, right? He's just not interested in any of this.
Though I have to say, I liked more how the three are sitting at the canteen and, well, let's just change it.
I mean,
And then Franklin appears and, I don't know.
in that
Franklin
way,
trying to play the head game.
it's very fun because we see all three crew members, they have perfect synergy with each other. They all have the exact right preferences for each other, just swap it out once, which is, it makes for a lot of fun. It could be a sitcom bit, this entire plot, which I think, fits Babylon 5 once again very well. The only slightly more serious side on this is Banya Kaura, of course, where, for one, Garibaldi engages in a little bit of abusing his own authority because he knows who is the best smuggler on the station and just casually utilizes this and nobody questions it, which, it's a funny kind of corruption, but it is still corruption. It's not okay that he's doing that. But he does it, for family reasons, because it's the 90s. We still have a lot of families that just don't talk to each other. So he had a dad who doesn't know how to tell him to love him. So making food is the best equivalent for that.
What does still mean? Do we nowadays don't have families where people talk not to each other anymore?
I mean, okay, mate. I was going to be optimistic, not cynical like you mentioned, to try and be optimistic about, but I guess not. Fine.
I mean, those are the boomers. They have the annoying families our generations doesn't talk to.
Okay. In any case, any further thoughts on this little sideline?
It's a nice thing to lighten up the mood.
It's also a very good way for JMS the writer to introduce Bagna Cauda to a whole new audience, because I don't know how many people knew about this Italian dish beforehand. I certainly didn't.
What is it made of, actually?
Olive oil and butter.
It's
Mostly.
just the way I looked it up, it's just oil, a lot of unhealthy oil with a few ingredients like help me out.
Anchovies and garlic.
Like seasoning, with a lot of seasoning to make it rather savory in its taste. And then I think the original version is that you just put different kind of vegetables in it. As far as I understood, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like that. Yeah, like putting meat in it is either a modern take on this, or it was the aristocratic way of taking this dish. By the way, the Asian countries have a, well, let's say, healthier version of this, which is hot pot. Try it; it's good.
Well, I mean, the portrayal in the show is kind of accurate. You basically just dip stuff in it on little skewers.
But I mean, olive oil and vegetables and stuff. I mean, Italian food is not known to be super unhealthy, so I don't know.
No, nobody.
It's the healthy kind of oil. Anyway. No further thoughts on that.
I noticed. Okay, so, then let's talk about our most grumpiest patient when it comes to the food plan and things in general. Sheridan is being confronted with an old mentor/friend, and this sparks some doubts about the challenges of his new command, because as much fun as it is to talk about the great adventures that they're having on the frontier, he is, as they put it so nicely in this episode, tied to a desk that is littered with trivia. So maybe let's talk a little bit about how we get on with this, because I think this kind of talks about some of the questions we had about Sheridan when he first arrived in the station.
Maybe before you two give your opinions, I like to say that to me, the overall impression here is that Sheridan is not just debating if he's in a wrong position because of him preferring to do other things, but because it doesn't run as smoothly as he is used to. I mean, he is in a different position. He has to do different things. There are different problems, and it feels a bit like, because it's not just immediately working as perfectly as he thinks or is used to, there is a problem, and he is thinking that everything that he's wrong where he is, and doesn't get that. Does only when Delenn, or after his talk with Delenn, get the idea of maybe I have to learn a few things.
I think this is a big part of it. I also always get the sense there is a little bit of peer pressure going on with there. Like, he is kind of driven to make his mentor proud. So this is why, especially when the other captain is aboard, it's kind of this, now I'm starting to think really if I'm happy with what I'm doing and the kind of work I have here and such. And it didn't come up so much before. I think there's also this kind of level of I want to make everybody proud, and I don't know if I'm doing a good enough job with that.
Yeah, but also I think the Maynard, I think he is projecting his own experience and maybe wishes on Sheridan. Like, okay, you're different now, or you seem a bit different than I'm used to, and therefore it feels like there's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this really short time, and he's not even trying to understand him or see that, or maybe accept that maybe the other one changed in some way. And yeah, it feels like it's just made up in his head through, yeah, like you said, peer pressure or from an outer experience or thoughts being put on him, how he has to go on with his life.
I think that's exactly right, and we see throughout this plot a little bit that Sheridan interacts with multiple people. He has a nice talk with Ivanova, he has a very nice talk with Dylan, and they sort of step by step dismantle these different levels of doubt and problems that I think Sheridan encounters here.
Can I maybe just at this point mention that the one problem he has to deal with right in the beginning is just very, very funny, because I feel like that's the most likely thing to even happen nowadays, when we only gather like different humans in places. The one with the smell, maybe not so much the body smell, but maybe food smell or anything. So to show this plot, I feel like they wrote a lot of very nice examples that are so real and feel like are taken so out of life. I really appreciated the scene. Do you know which one I'm talking about, right?
It'd be nice if you described it more, but I know which one you mean.
The first one with Susan, where Susan comes into his office and she says that there are these two different species, and the one complained that the other one smell, and then they explain to them that the smell cannot reach them because the air is recycled, but psychologically they are so annoyed by it that they say, no, I smell it, and then they have to change the quarters. And I feel like, yeah, this could happen in real life in a place where many people gather. And so the problems here picked are, I think, very realistic.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same level of kids in school. I want to sit with that person. I don't like that one. No, I want to sit there. It's the same, yeah, stupid reasoning. But yeah, people tend to be that even when they grow up.
And I mean, it's a well-chosen example because it's exactly the kind of thing that the starship captain doesn't have to deal with, because people don't get to choose their quarters on a military starship. They are where they are, and there's no question about it. So this isn't the kind of problem that he usually has to engage with. Usually he can just say, this is how it is, and be done with it. And here he has to negotiate. And here people want to talk to him personally and not somebody else. So he doesn't get to delegate this away. And obviously it's an extremely childish vision of, they smell bad because they're carrion eaters. But obviously there's probably like 1,500 years of history why these two species have been at war. And you can't also easily dismiss that, because then suddenly it's going to be like, oh, you are denying this genocide that happened against us. It's it can so easily turn into a delicate situation. So yeah, it's this kind of problem that he didn't really ever sign up for, that he wasn't trained for, as he mentions also, that he just kind of has to grow into.
Yes, and I mean, I think the nice thing is that you actually see him grow. You actually see him surprised. You actually see him come up with creative solutions. You actually see him struggle with decisions, as when two of the fighters did not return from hyperspace at first. I mean, he's a character we see grow. We don't see him at the end of a career that was successful.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think we have a similar situation with Sheridan and Garibaldi when he's telling about this shoplifting thing that goes on. I mean, in the end, it is just some, what was it? Some rather trivial, some kids stealing stuff. Yeah, I dare you to. Kind of thing, but the beginning when Garibaldi is telling him this, and Sheridan is like, yeah, I don't want to know about this. Give me the results. In one way I can understand him, because he can't take care of everything, and yeah, Garibaldi is the security chief, so it's his job to take care of this. But on the other hand, I mean, there could have been more in it. It's a bit troublesome in this version, because, yeah, it's Garibaldi is telling Sheridan about it when there is no reason that this is something big.
I very much get the sense that here Sheridan is just sending very mixed signals. I feel like he came on the station and was like, yeah, just tell me everything. I want to know everything. I want to be in charge of this like I was on my ship. And now Garibaldi is doing this, and now Sheridan is annoyed because now he's under stress. I want to know the important things. This is what I always said. And ultimately, the thing that Sheridan needs to do is, like you described, implement a system that the people he works with know when to tell him things so that the important stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. And Sheridan just needs to develop the experience to know what he wants to hear and in what order and how not to get overwhelmed with these things. And he doesn't have that yet. So right now he's just working in this binary tell me nothing or tell me everything, which, both of which are problematic. I mean, in this case, Layla, you already mentioned his interactions with Ivanova when he has to resolve the entire thing. And now, after the absolute disaster that was the Ivanova scene with Franklin, this was an interaction I really enjoyed seeing, that Ivanova takes the initiative and says, okay, we have talked about all the orders that need to go out. Are you okay? Because you very much don't seem okay. And he takes her up on that offer, and they have this interaction which doesn't immediately resolve anything. Ivanova isn't the wise mentor that can make all these worries go away, but you see that there is very much, these are two command level officers. They should be able to support each other in this role and be able to come up with solutions effectively, which they do, which is nice to see. And it is also a nice way of, here are two characters having a friendly conversation, and it doesn't even revolve around beautiful curves. It's crazy how that is possible.
Yeah. Also, I always think I like to see really when something happens, like an old a teacher, an old person from your past, someone characters look up to, someone characters learn from. I always like plots where these characters are written into it. I mean, we all of us, we enjoyed Delen's old teacher, master, whatever appearing. And yeah, I think it's very nice to see how people interact around that, and also to see that we have our characters here at one point in their life that we see that they had to grow, we see where they came from, just in general. It gives a certain warmth to these interactions. So I think I said that a lot in season 1. I very much enjoyed the relationship Ivanova and Sinclair had, and here's to see that with Maynard and Sheridan really gives him a warmth and a depth that in general I think was nice to see, because we all have these people in our lives. That's, I think, clear. We all have that to some degree, and seeing that written out is always nice.
And I think we also see that Ivanova is somewhat sensitive to that kind of thing, because she's the one that calls out, hey, is he the guy that this Egyptian proverb from and stuff. So she recognizes that this is a relationship that is very important to Sheridan, and that goes beyond the funny nicknames they have for each other. So she calls that out, and they can work with that, which is just very nice.
Yes, I like it when he's called Johnny. My first cat was called Johnny, so I don't know that I was being so little. Yeah, so yeah, sorry. Yeah, Johnny. Hi, Johnny.
Yeah, I think we can go now to the Cortez departing.
Yes, maybe let's go first to the first conversation that before the Cortez is parting again. We have that really matters, because we have been introduced a few times already to the fact that being an explorer in this universe is actually risky, because you can always step on old things where you never know what actually they do. We have also learned that being an archaeologist is a lot more adventurous than for us nowadays. Actually, you have the Pharaoh's curse everywhere, basically. And we have now and then heard that at the Rim, things are happening that no one really understands. We have seen this in a few episodes. Even Jakar came back completely in shock. And now we have this explorer who also comes there and says, something is happening. There is something weird. So it's another piece of the puzzle in that direction, even before the Cortez departs and the real mystery of the episode starts.
And I mean, that you mentioned that is also, it's once again a great showcase that in this Babylon 5 universe, exploring the universe is an extremely diverse field. You have scientists that go out there as archaeologists, you have this ship that builds jump gates, you have other ships that do just surveying work, so it's not the situation of we have an exploration vessel that does everything. It's this huge effort, and on all of these different fronts, we are now starting to see these like individual signs, and yeah, they are like puzzle pieces that we are slowly putting together, which is just fascinating to see. And I mean, to move the plot along, as soon as the Cortez goes into the unknown, we immediately see how dangerous it is, because there isn't even some mysterious attack or anything. It's a technical malfunction that occurs, and suddenly the ship is on fire, which, you know, in good sci-fi fashion, every single console sparks and bursts into flames.
People are thrown everywhere. I love it.
This is not Johnny, by the way. Johnny is already crossed the rainbow bridge. This is a younger cat.
Question is it just a technical malfunction, or was there something more? Because I have to admit, at that point, I didn't really get it if it was just some malfunctioning, or if it was like the Reaper version enemy. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think we can say for sure that it wasn't an attack, because the last time we saw this shadow ship attack something, this like weird crab-like spider in whatever that is, it just blew stuff up immediately, right? But it's very possible that it was going past once, right? Like, nobody called it out, but we see it going past and just exploding a fighter on accident almost, it looks like. So, who knows? It's very possible, for sure.
So maybe next time, putting out in front of any jump gate, careful Reaper crossing.
I would enjoy that. Make some like traffic lights up. What I very much enjoy is the sense that something goes wrong and we don't immediately go into panic mode. We have like a very measured response, which I already liked very much with Catherine as well. That, you know, she encounters something big in space and has to deal with it, and then she just goes through the motions fixing the problem as best she can. So we see that, you know, there's professionals working in space. I always enjoy that.
Yeah, it's a realistic take, because I mean, if you have, doesn't matter where you go, if it's a policeman, if it's a firefighter, if it's the military, if you have someone that panics with just a bit going wrong, they would have chosen the wrong profession.
I mean, this is interesting because we already talked about, I think in the context with the warrior cast, you know, what are the reasons for having a big military and stuff, and you mentioned both, I think, catastrophical aid in case of floods, of storms and stuff. Like, having a military structure, this is why we even have it in Starfleet and Star Trek, isn't just about, we go out and fighting wars. You have a big organization with very functioning, like, practical structure. So if you have something like a ship lost in hyperspace, we see immediately how having a squadron of Star Furies on board Babylon 5 is useful for more things than just fighting off raiders. This is a group of pilots that are very skilled, that have dependable loyalty to the station, that you can send out and do dangerous missions with. And, you know, it's nice to see. It's nice to see these tools utilized in this show in ways that are more sophisticated than just, we can shoot things and then there's fireworks.
I mean, it's kind of the same fascination that you have with series that revolve around, like, firefighters or anything. It's not like they go out there, we're going to kick some butt. It's the contrary, we're going to help people. And I really like to see this contrast shown here.
Yes, and especially also the fact that the big challenge of being in space out there is still nature in some form. Like, hyperspace in and of itself is dangerous. And I really enjoy, you alluded to this very in the beginning here, that the thing in hyperspace is treated much the same way. From what we've seen here, this isn't a malicious thing. It just is in hyperspace flying around. And if you get too close to it, it just blows you up. Not even by shooting at you, it's just there. and it can be dangerous, it can cause malfunctions, it can even destroy a ship, but it's also what guides our best pilot Keffer in the end home. If you start learning about it, if you start observing it from a distance and figure out how it relates to you, it can also be a useful thing.
I would be interested to see if I'm sure there is a lot of comparison between science fiction travel and travel on ships on the ocean. I mean, we have this lifeline they're putting out there, and I think the understanding is rather the same, because it's again man against nature.
I think it's just no coincidence that we have this lifeline comparison, that the ship is named the Cortez, which for all the colonial undertones is also just Age of Sail. Of course, it's this era of naval exploration as well. Harkening back to that is, a staple of science fiction. And I think Babylon 5 does this here very effectively.
Maybe also to just sum up what we have seen these spider-like creatures, I think once before. Once before we have seen them in that form when they were sitting with Mr. Morden at the end of season 1, I think. And now we have learned that they can live in hyperspace. Maybe that's just something we have learned that, right?
I mean, their ship is in hyperspace, right?
In their form in which they sat in the living room with Mr. Morden, in their form, you've seen them in hyperspace. Yeah, right?
No, the appearance with Morden was different. It was more like I would go more in the direction maybe of a mantis, because you have like this upper body, or like a centaur, because you have a lot of feet, but like a I don't know, an upper body displayed, and this spidery thing is so far just appeared as spaceship, or at least a spaceship correlation situation.
Okay, yes, but still we have to keep in mind that they kind of sit there. I find that always the very interesting and haunting aspect of this plot, that they are just there in this space that is so surreal and difficult to navigate for us, and they just sit there.
I mean, one of the things we have definitely seen is when they were attacking Quadrant 37, they just kind of shimmer in and out of existence. So they don't seem to access hyperspace through gates or through the same kind of swirly swirl that all the spaceships do that we've seen on, everything else. So they might live in hyperspace, they might be native to it, they might just have different ways of accessing it, who knows? But certainly they interact with it in a different way, in a more natural way, it seems. So they are out there, and that's scary.
They get the kind of, if we stick to the ocean metaphoric, it's like a bit the Kraken.
Yes. I mean, also the design kind of fits, right? They have sort of tentacle arms going on for themselves. I mean, this is talking about the ocean. They mentioned briefly that what happens if you get lost in hyperspace, you drift off the gravitational incline, which is weird because so far we haven't seen any planets or stars or anything that would have mass in hyperspace. So, it's this unusual sense of you get dragged to the bottom of whatever this weird other dimension is. So is it like an ocean where it just gets darker and darker and eventually you get eaten up by a kraken or so? Who knows? I mean, we already alluded with the lifeboats a little bit, with the lifeline a little bit, to the whole solution that Sheridan comes up with. Yes, we are also crossing the third 20-minute mark line there. And I think the most notable thing is here, apart from losing one of our pilots, Warren Keffer comes face to face with the Shadow. Big crab ship Kraken. Let's call it the Kraken for now. And Meike, you mentioned humans come face to face with it, but till the end of the episode, it's still very much treated as it felt weird. I think I saw something yada yada yada. It's still very much a seaman's tale, a fisherman's yarn, not so much something that is really confirmed.
Yeah, I think the problem here is that for us it's rather clear portrayed. We have we have like a proper shadow that has a line that separates it from the rest of the universe. And I think what they are trying here to implement is that we see this, but it's just presented for us in this way. It's just more like something you see out in the corner of your eye, or something like a weird change of temperature that just passes, something like that.
I think that is very true, and it's definitely clear that we as the audience right now know a lot more about these things. Like to Warren Keffer, this is just a shape in the corner of his eye in hyperspace. We know that these are things that, if they want to destroy something, they can shoot lasers. We know that they can interact with the world in a much more normal way, I would say. Whereas, to the rest of the galaxy, like Jakar describes, it's more a giant hand reached out of space and squashed our outpost. Much more poetic like that. And so it will be probably for the rest of the season interesting to see how do our characters chase after this phantom to get to the point where we are now.
Oh, I like that you go here with term phantom.
Yeah, phantoms, like the Phantom of Babylon 5 and the opera. we can make that work, don't worry about it. But if we are talking about like the big poetic descriptions that Jakar comes up with, looking at the time, maybe it is time to talk about the big final discussion that Delenn and Sheridan have in the wake of this encounter. It's not that Sheridan has encountered this weird thing by himself, but he is under this impression of 2 of my pilots have died at that point, reckoning with that, with this unknown danger out in space. And Delenn comforts him. And the way she does this, I think, gives us a lot of insight of where she herself is at the moment. But also like the way I think that her very Minbari point of view of the world starts to change with her, getting closer to humanity here. And I think this is where maybe we get the very first inklings of this more psychological insight that we've been looking for after her transition.
Could you elaborate a bit more about this, how you get to the idea?
I think we had her already talk, for example, when the Seeker of the Grail came to the station, about Minbari culture, how Minbari are convinced that the universe is trying to understand itself, that the soul is kind of like a projected shadow in this world that comes from somewhere beyond and such. So we know the Minbari have sort of this view on the world, but at that point it was also, the same Minbari that are willing to do some orbital bombardment if somebody wrongs them. So it was difficult to put into the right category here. And now I feel like she's talking about the same idea, but when she talks to Sheridan about it, she's not so much talking about the Minbari circle of souls and how every generation returns to the same like grand soul of the Minbari. She's now talking about it in much more all-inclusive terms, in a way that is much more reminiscent of something like Carl Sagan's talks, where he has this very famous Star Stuff speech, this idea that we are all the universe made manifest, but now she's talking about it in terms of your molecules are the same of the station and the same of the stars, which is a much more accessible way, I would imagine, for somebody who isn't into all that soul stuff so much. So I feel like she's kind of opening up the very restrictive religious view of the Minbari to the wider world. Does that make any sense to anyone?
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay.
The funny thing is, this whole we are star stuff thing, just I think yesterday or no, maybe even a day before that, I listened to a podcast where exactly this quote was part of it. I don't remember everything about it, but yeah, kind of like an interesting coincidence to have this appear now again.
Once you guys start looking for it, it's like a very famous, like an intrinsic idea of a lot of science fiction and by now beyond. So we can start finding it everywhere. It's very good.
Yeah, well, it's like the I would say the space transition of we're all just humans.
Yeah.
Like there is no real difference between you and me when it comes down to the most important parts. We're the same.
Because we were all of our planets were depending on certain ingredients to form life, and that had to come from this galaxy. So yeah.
Which brings us also straight back to the discussion that she has with the Minbari before, right? Like if the us that she's talking about is just star stuff, then obviously any concern about her becoming more or less human or more or less Minbari is meaningless now, because it's all the same anyway. But, she should have probably told him about that perspective of hers, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. But what do you think about it's a nice sentiment, it's a nice speech and all that, but what do you think about it in the context of Sheridan's problem here, where he has the very immediate problem of, I'm not sure anymore if I'm good in this command because I just sent 2 people to their death. Is this something that holds enough hopeful messaging for you that this is an effective way of finding hope, or is it maybe a bit too spiritual for that?
I would say for me personally, it would be much too spiritual, because I don't believe in anything like fate or being put in the right place or in any kind of magic in the universe. But the way I have now kind of re-described Sheridan in my mind, I've pointed out how he believes in a kind of God that made evolution start, how all his anecdotes are so much about every kind of spiritual stuff. I think for him it was just the right thing. I think for him as a character, that was just what he needed to hear. He needed someone to point out that the universe has all of these wondrous aspects, because he's very open for that.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, my approach would be that there are people that have to see meaning in everything that is happening. And then there are others that say, yeah, not everything has a meaning. Some things are just happening. And so far, it's not much that we know about Sheridan, but there is this tendency towards the spiritual, or let's say more the religious path, and therefore it fits for him here to have this idea of there's something bigger happening, something you do not understand, and therefore even though you feel bad now that these 2 died, there's more to it than just the death. And I think that's also something that's really helpful to a lot of people who lose someone, not just in this context, but also in the context of losing someone that's dear to them.
I think that's very accurate, especially, Layla, you describing Sheridan in that way, because we get this entire scene with him talking to these pilots beforehand, and it feels very much on that level, also the level that Ivanova talks to him about, every one of the people on the Cortez knows what they sign up for and such. On that level, obviously, he has to understand how to deal with losses, because he's in the military, he has commanded starships. This isn't the first time he has lost anyone, I'm sure. But I feel like he, in this episode, has this slight spiritual crisis about it that needs to be addressed. And this is what Delenn taps into. What I'm not 100% sure on is if this is just her way of dealing with everything and it just happens to be exactly what he needs to hear, or if she really is that good at reading him and knowing that this is what he should be told at this moment. I'm not entirely sure here. With Sinclair, I would have been very happy to assume that she knows him well enough. With Sheridan, I'm not sure if they had enough time to have this kind of relationship already.
I'm very sure that they don't, and I even think that she might just be hopeful to have another human who's open for that.
I think so. It might just come down to the fact how he has been reacting to her ever since the transformation. Like even in this episode, we have like the contrast between him and Captain Mainhard reacting to her, and everybody else being like slightly taken aback. So she just, takes it on faith here.
I mean, so far he is just, okay, you've changed. That's fine. We still can work together, and there's no problem. It's like, I don't bother, and I think that's a rather welcoming feeling for her, especially since her own people are questioning what she is in a sense. So
this might be a little bit of an ambitious pull here, but I wonder if this is maybe where him being a star killer actually comes in handy, because he is somebody who in the war managed to win a victory against the Minbari because he doesn't see them as the mythical alien entity that is just overrunning humanity. He's thinking about them as, okay, they have ships, they have a certain reasoning, I can lure them into a trap and I can blow them up. He's thinking of them as somebody, I can understand how you think, I can understand how you tick. So he's not making this distinction between, they are alien to me and I can't possibly comprehend what they are doing. And maybe because he initially has this very pragmatic approach, it's much easier for him to kind of look past, well, she has hair or not. That never really was such a big consideration for him in the first place. I wonder if this is just a way of that he's just learned to interact with others that maybe other people haven't so much. Okay, I think we touched on like the big story points for sure, and we've passed yet another 20-minute mark here. So I think it's high time that we go over into the tapestry. What do you say? Okay, this time I won't bother pulling it up because I haven't updated the graphic yet, but I will. But you all know now what it looks like. It's this beautiful roster of all the episode titles and thumbnails that we will be talking in this season 2. And below them we have arranged in different colors the notes for the various threads that hold Babylon 5 together, that are beyond the main plot thread. Of course, we can note down for the main plot, we see the mysterious giant phantom vessels again. Other than that, what of the threads that we've laid out so far can we continue? As a reminder, there is everything about Sheridan. How does Sheridan deal with diplomacy and his new duties? How loyal is he to Earth? Where do his loyalties lie? We have also the plot line continuing for the Minbari mystery, how that is going. And we have introduced in the last episode Sheridan's dealing with the loss of his wife. Is this something that should come up? As well as various characters like Garibaldi going on. And let's just talk very briefly about, are there important milestones on any of these things that you think are worth noting down this time around?
I think it is definitely worth to note down that there is a big mystery about hyperspace and about the rim going on. And for me, as a first-time viewer at this point, it was still the question of what the hell can it be that takes it out of the level that it is in right now? What can it be? What kind of explanation? What kind of adventure can it be in the end to really make it worth it, to make it this memorable thing in the end? Because I had no idea why all of these little puzzle pieces should interest me and how to put them together.
Yeah, well, the important part here is that the enemy, the danger, it's starting to take form. I mean, we already have seen it, or it was more like ghosting around. You had this idea as a viewer that there is something going on, but since there is this direct connection now to B5, it gets more imminent and therefore more present and more dangerous, because the gap is closing.
I think the connection to B5 that you mentioned is very notable, right? Every time we've seen these phantom vessels before, they've been somewhere out there on Mr. Morden's behalf, seemingly doing stuff. Now they are just randomly appearing close to the station, which, puts them much, much closer to home, yeah. Beyond the main plot threads, talking about Sheridan, for example, do you think he is now ready to settle into his role, or is this something that you expect to recur? Is this maybe a continuation of him dealing with also like being a workaholic now that he's kind of reintroduced grieving for his wife again?
That's an interesting question. It could go both ways, but I don't think he is like more of a structured, of a straight line character. Therefore, this shifting, if it reoccurs, then I don't think that it's like a minor thing, but just one big thing that blows up.
So there might be some like big emotional crisis ahead for him, but not less of a...
If there is, I'm not really sure if it will happen again, at least not so soon, I would presume. So that it's important when it happens, since we were already introduced of his workaholic state now, and the problem he, at least at the beginning, had with adjusting to his new job. I would say to have more impact, it would, if it happens at a later point, and that it's getting something, either that it's happening something bigger, or that it is blocking something of importance.
I can see that. Any of the other points you would like to bring in, or not so much?
Of course, we have Warren, who was promoted. And well, it does have to have some meaning, considering that he is mentioned in the beginning as an important character.
I mean, his importance does make a little more sense now, because he finally has a connection to one of the plots here, right? Like, he does have now the closest connection to the phantom vessels of any of our crew. So I imagine that if this is going to become his chase, maybe this is how he kind of gets pushed towards the center of attention a little bit more. Although it's a shame that like the one named friend he had in this episode immediately died, so he's still like on the verge of almost a disposable side character, still very much for somebody who's in the main credits. Okay. In this case, let's move on from the tapestry, and the last thing that's left for us is our post box, which is going to be considerably shorter, because unfortunately YouTube was very slow to work on our last episode release, or rather I should have started the upload a little bit sooner. So there hasn't been as much time for people to comment on it, which might be a blessing so that we can get through this in a timely manner. But we did get one involved comment by Texas Under Shock on our Technomage episode, talking about both plots of that episode, and maybe we can mention both of these a little bit here. For one, was talking about the Drazi plotline as something they found always a little bit fun, if not kind of silly. And the comparison that they drew, which I guess with the name Texas Under Shock makes sense, is a very American one. Red and blue as green and purple, the Drazi conflict internally as kind of the two-party system conflict that, you know, every election year in the US stands under. So I don't know if you want to go further into any of this. We talked a little bit of how the whole discussion about how arbitrary flags are or not can be had on all these different levels, from national to political to any other level.
I think we covered it.
The other one is on the comparison between the Reapers and Morden's associates. Because we mentioned indoctrination here as this thing where, you know, there might or might not be a telepathic influence. And for you, Meike, this might be more immediately interesting because you have more experience with the Reapers here. But Texas Ala Shock wrote, the Reapers were frightening because they slowly break down your will. They kind of dismantle your own agency with this outside influence of indoctrination, whereas Mr. Morden and his associates seem to be more focused on you making your own choice, and that being a different kind of evil to interact with. And I find that is an interesting perspective, because it's two very different horrors that are kind of portrayed in here. One being this like outside force that is infiltrating you and you can't do anything about it, and the other one being more about playing your own weaknesses against you.
Certainly, because it's on the Reaper part is in Mass Effect is more like you have your control. You yourself are not able to be judged, because you do not have control at a certain point. Probably, maybe not even in the beginning, depending on which character or which version you see in Mass Effect you concentrate on.
Yeah.
While we have with these shadows from Morden or Morden himself, it's more like crystallizing the darkness inside you, which means you are able to be judged. You are the person who is making the decision, which is not an external monsterization, but more an internal monsterization that's going on here.
From that perspective, it feels like if Londo is ever held accountable for what happened at Quadrant 37, the whole idea of it was indoctrination might be his defense on this. Like, I'm not accountable for what happened there. I mean,
of course, you could with Lando. It is that there is not like, hey, I want you to do this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this is left open, and therefore he is accountable, because if you because you don't say something doesn't make it right.
I mean, and also is then the question, okay, of course you weren't telling Mr. Morden to blow everything up, but on the other hand, what did you expect would happen? Like, is there any scenario where this wouldn't result in some kind of atrocity, right? Like, there is not really a good outcome, even if you didn't predict this specific bad one. What I find interesting about this comparison as well is if we look at Mass Effect 1 Saren as the one example of indoctrination, I always understood it as this idea that he got this vision of the return of this ancient evil is inevitable, so I might as well join it. And that was kind of this idea that indoctrination planted in his mind. And this is something that I can kind of find in Londo as well, this sense of inevitability. Just with Londo, it comes from his own vision of his own death, which we saw in the very beginning, Midnight on the Firing Line. So there is still this sense of inevitability, but it here comes from himself. It's not an idea externally implanted in him. And I think that, in that way, the idea of the comment is very, very fitting. So I just thought this was a fun thought to bring in here. And I'm also,
Though as far as I remember, Mass Effect 1 and Saren's intention, it felt more like he was trying to be a bridge between the Reaper and the rest of the universe. That not everyone gets destroyed, but that there is a chance of living or a coexistence.
It's like definitely still like spinning every action, like it's still for the greater good of the galaxy in some way. I'm not really aiding the evil guys here, right? Which I don't know if the same can be said for Londo. I mean, I don't think he sees himself as the bad guy necessarily, but he's certainly aware that the Centauri themselves aren't necessarily beloved by everyone, and he's happy to take that into account.
I have a feeling that there is a Mass Effect and it's coming up.
No, if there's comments latching onto these little comparisons, I'm happily feeding into that, because, how often do fans of both things have a chance to talk about it? It's a very niche within a niche thing. But I think this does it for the longer term comments we had. We are, of course, very happy that we are without sickness this time round, and hopefully, fingers crossed, this will keep this way. With that, next week, hopefully, we will talk about The Long Dark, another very ominous sounding episode. So, maybe we will meet the Reapers outright with that kind of title. Until then, outro time, where can people find us?
You can find us on Facebook, where we also have our own group. We are also on Twitter and on Instagram, and of course on YouTube. We are the Third Age Podcast everywhere. We also have a Mastodon account, which has not really started yet. I'm trying to do my best, but it's a lot of work, everything we do here. You can also find us anywhere where you can listen to podcasts, of course, but here on YouTube, we're the cutest, because here you can see us.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and will come around for the next one.